Hello and welcome back to JLXP, the Josh Leesman Experience. I am Joshua Dat Leesman, and we just had ourselves a day. Week 9, day 2 of the LCS. So many possible tiebreaker scenarios. It actually ended up that there were 4 tiebreaker games to be played, which means those will take place at Monday on noon. You probably will have listened to this podcast by the time that happens, but I wanted to talk about something else. So for those of you who are listening to it in the morning, there are still big tiebreakers to be played for both second place and sixth place. So Golden Guardians will play the winner of the Dignitas versus Immortals match for 6th. They're the top seed in the tiebreaker because they have the best cumulative head-to-head record against the other 2 teams they're tied with. And then EG will await the winner of 100 Thieves versus FlyQuest for 2nd. I don't want to talk about those teams. That will come during my podcast with Keen later on in the week, and I'm sure there'll be lots of conversation there. The most prominent thing in my mind right now is the fact that Team Liquid is actually eliminated, and the fact that their last hurrah was actually pretty epic. So I'm going to get into a lot of stuff this episode. I'm going to talk about the game itself. I'm going to retro a little bit of Team Liquid's 2-year run and how I think it should be remembered and how it might change now that this has happened. I want to dissect a little bit what went wrong with Team Liquid this split. And I also really want to talk about where they go from here, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack. So I've done a bit of thinking. I have a few notes, and we're going to see where this goes. The game itself between C9 and TL, I had the pleasure of casting it with Captain Flowers, and there was so much tension before it, which when you consider just the split before it wouldn't necessarily make sense. Like a 7-10 team who needs to win against a 16-1 team. But by the way, the 7-10 team also just lost to FlyQuest and have looked bad. There isn't much tension there. You're just kind of waiting for them to die. But because this Team Liquid team, all we've seen is them raising trophies for 2 straight years. There was always that thought in the back of my head, and every time someone asked me, when are you going to say Team Liquid is dead? When are you going to be worried about Team Liquid? Sure, I got a little bit more worried, but I was never going to say they were dead until they were mathematically eliminated. And yesterday, Saturday, when they lost to FlyQuest, they lost control of their own destiny. They needed so many dominoes to fall in this particular way. They needed Golden Guardians to win, or they needed Dignitas to win. 2 teams that had looked lost. They win. They took care of business. Those teams could still actually make playoffs. Team Liquid is 9th now after this loss, but everything fell exactly the way it needed to fall to set up this dream scenario for Team Liquid to be able to take down C9. And I felt like both teams got up for this game because Team Liquid still have the memories of being a great team, and C9 is that great team, but also a lot of this team, like Licorice and Niski and Reapered and Blabber, who wasn't necessarily playing in the finals because it was Fenskaren, but he was still on the team, remember how close C9 was to beating Team Liquid last summer finals, and the opportunity to end their split and make this thing final was just so big. The fact that C9 didn't just roll over Team Liquid, I do think is a testament to the fact that Team Liquid can still play. They had a disastrous split. We'll get into all of these things. It is the biggest failure by an LCS team in the LCS, I think, what has happened to them this split, but we'll get to that. The game itself, so much tension. Broxah missing a point-blank cocoon really early on in the game against Niski's Rumble. Team Liquid losing control of the game. But then Doublelift starts landing arrows. And I'm thinking for a moment that Team Liquid could actually do it, that we could be in the midst of this. And mind you, if they win this game, they still have to win 2 more afterwards. They'd still have to win the 4-way tiebreaker for 6th place. So it's already unlikely, but you're actually thinking they can do it. Then the fights start rolling in. There's a fight in mid lane where Doublelift gets engaged on, but he actually stands his ground and burns through Olaf, and you're thinking, holy crap, like Doublelift is back. But then Niski just lands rumble after rumble. Sven starts landing more Varus ultimates. He does the AP build, so the super strong front line of Aatrox, Ornn, their percent health just gets totally wrecked by the Varus. And then when you're building for this climactic Elder Dragon fight, because it's been back and forth and the gold is close and everyone's level 18 and all the Ornn items have been upgraded, Doublelift his max items, what happens but Sven and Vulcan ulting into the back door without the minion bonus, proccing Demolish, killing the turret, and then the double flash by both the Tahm Kench and the Varus to end the game. Like, just an unreal moment. I am glad that we got to have it with all else that is happening in the world right now, just to kind of refocus on those amazing storylines and enjoy it for that moment. I'm just really appreciative. But more than that, now we're left with this scenario. I saw a Reddit comment actually after the FlyQuest game yesterday, because most people thought that Team Liquid, like in the moment, they thought Team Liquid needed to win the FlyQuest game because they basically did to have a chance. And then the dominoes fell afterwards to make it so they had the second chance. But Liminal Millennial posted a bunch of these milestones that happened now that Team Liquid's actually lost to Cloud9. The last time Impact missed a major region playoff was 2014 summer when he was on SKT. Broxah had never missed a major region playoff. Jensen, the last time he missed was 2015 summer when he was known as Incarnation, and actually that was the C9 Worlds run where he actually went to Worlds that year because they made it through the gauntlet. Corja Day hadn't missed since spring 2016 when he was on Samsung Galaxy. Doublelift technically missed in 2017 TL when he saved Team Liquid from relegation before rejoining TSM in the summer, so I don't really count that. I kind of feel like this is the first time Doublelift has truly missed playoffs. The defending champion in the LCS had actually never failed to reach playoffs, let alone Team Liquid, who post-franchising had only ever won splits, and now they didn't make the playoffs. So many of those things stacked up against each other. Add that to the fact that they changed their jungler to Broxah from Xmithie. Still didn't have it work. Everyone in their preseason power rankings, just kind of assuming Broxah would get there, we're thinking, you know what, they'll be the best. They're actually probably going to be fine even before Broxah gets there because there's so much talent on the rest of the team. And yeah, none of that ended up being true. They only won 7 games and they're 9th place. So I think we've been talking about it all year, but I wanted to kind of sum up what happened, what has happened, what will continue to happen for TL in this collapse. So I think it is truly a combination of factors. I think it is some unluckiness and some natural forms of demise. And the unluckiness is to the visa stuff, for sure. Broxah wasn't with the team until week 4. And I'll explain why this is worse than it might seem at first. This isn't going to be a whole bunch of excuses. I think Team Liquid has tons of culpability, but I want to acknowledge kind of all sides here. So throughout all of Team Liquid's run, they were a bot team, bot-focused team, where Doublelift would even say in interviews, I remember this during their first run in 2018 spring, when they were a middle-of-the-pack team until the end, where they actually finished the regular season 4th and then steamrolled through the playoffs to eventually 3-0 100 Thieves in the final. Doublelift said in an interview before the playoffs, oh yeah, we haven't really been able to win that much, so we're just going to play around bot lane. We're just going to do that really well. This isn't exactly what he said, but this is how it was interpreted by basically everyone. And then they did. And they just continued to control games so well around this bottom lane vision control, Drake control, turret control, doublelift carry performance, and everyone was sacrificing to make that happen. But then what I think happened is you looked at all their international results and they kept losing to mid-jungle teams. Most successful professional teams that have won have done it through mid-jungle. FPX, Doin BTN, great mid-jungle. Any team with Faker ever, mid-jungle. It just is kind of the way the teams win internationally, aside from Uzi's RNG. That's like the only exception that TL was originally kind of trying to just replicate. So the whole idea when they bring in Broxah is to also do mid-jungle. They could have Doublelift and Core JJ, and they could still be great, but the team is going to shift to a new style. And they just get stuck because you can't practice mid-jungle when you don't have the jungle. You probably could have practiced bot without the jungler. It obviously is a little different, but the most crucial piece was missing there for them early on. And then Broxah comes in and they're obviously late to the party. Everyone else has been playing for a month or more. They don't look immediately better. Then there's this other like weird thing that happens where Doublelift gets sick and they sub in tactical and they win. And they say that Doublelift is benched. Because I can imagine, right? They're losing these games with Doublelift. They're having this painful transition between being a bot-focused team to finding a new identity. They finally get this bot lane carry who's not, maybe he's going to be more comfortable playing in this new environment, and they win 2 games. So I think, you know what? Let's just roll with it. Then after a single loss, they put Doublelift back in. And I think looking back, that is a mistake. I think either you actually play at least a whole week with Doublelift officially benched, or you just don't bench him at all. Like, commit for more than a game. And then I think towards the end of the split with the Kalista Taric games, they tried a little bit more of going back to bot focus, but they still never truly found their identity. Even in the final C9 game, they picked the Elise, Aatrox, Ornn, and basically just tried to camp dive top. Doublelift actually played a really strong weak side Ashe game with Ashe Braum and nearly carried anyway, but that's the style that they hadn't really been succeeding with the whole split. So I'm going to be really curious if they continue to attempt mid-jungle in summer, if we see a roster change, if we see a coach change, or if they just go back to bot focus. But a few other things I wanted to touch on. The Broxah versus Xmithie thing. At the time, I said that I expected them to do it, but I don't know for sure if it'll work. Only because you're breaking up what has worked for 4 splits in a row, and that inherently has a level of risk. The example that jumps off the page at you is when 2017 TSM did this after winning 3 out of 4 splits and all 3 splits with Doublelift, and they bring in Sven and Xmithie, and the dynasty just dies. They had been to every single finals. They didn't make finals that year. The next closest they got was actually, funnily enough, the Sven game in 2019 spring where he face checks Skarner. We know that story. But for Team Liquid specifically, the question that I think can be speculated on is how well would this team have done if they kept Xmithie? Because this is the other side of it. Well, yep, they had an identity crisis. They tried to switch to mid-jungle. They had visa issues. They had weird benchings with Doublelift. They had drafts that I didn't think matched what they were trying to do in the game. And I think that's a bit of a byproduct of them trying to switch styles and trying to draft for new styles. But overall, I think their drafts were pretty bad. At the very least, they were not in sync with how the team was playing. But take all the other factors around Team Liquid, where they focus so hard this style for 2 years, and they don't even make it out of groups. Run that back with Xmithie, and what happens? I think because they'd actually have their jungler for the first 3 weeks, they pick up another win or two, and I think they make playoffs. But I also think that C9 is still way better than them. The other things that happened with this team this split, Impact looked bad for a lot of games. That's not Broxah and Xmithie's fault. Xmithie didn't gank top that often. Like, it has a little bit to do with it, but he looked bad. Doublelift is hugely culpable in all of this. He was 0-4 on Senna, which at the time that he was playing it was busted. Looking back, Senna's only been nerfed from those moments, and because Doublelift was coasting, because he didn't think Spring Split mattered, he just got abused by the rest of the LCS, and the coaches kept picking up Senna. The coaches actually in this situation said, hey, Senna's a good pick, Doublelift, play it. But there was definite signals being crossed there in the wrong way, because Doublelift, when you saw him in game, was not a clean Senna. So you don't pick a player, a champ he's not good at. So that is culpability on both the players and coaches in that way. And towards the very last game of the split, Doublelift finally looked kind of okay. He had one other Varus game in the split where he looked strong. But talking overall about Doublelift's culpability in this, he shoulders a good amount of it. I think take Impact, Jensen, Doublelift, and Core and put in Xmithie in this weird hypothetical, like they never even made the Broxah trade, and they had Xmithie for all 18 games. They win 10, 11. I really don't think that this would all be on the weirdness that erupts from bringing in a new jungler. I do think there is more at play from attitude, and when you win 4 splits in a row, you do start to take winning for granted a little bit, and that's one other thing I wanted to do during this podcast was take a quick look back at the 4 splits that they actually did win, because I think it's interesting that this title we gave Team Liquid of best team North America has ever produced, because it's true in the fact that they won 4 splits in a row, but I think it's not true in the fact that at an individual moment, I think there may have been teams that look stronger. Like, this is a little nuanced, and actually I had a longer conversation about this with Keen on my ill-fated Wednesday podcast where I had some technical issues and did not record my own audio, so it is lost. But this was kind of the thought. It was like, are people going to remember Team Liquid differently now that they've lost? Because you can make a somewhat dishonest argument that they were never super dominant in any of their wins. So 2018 spring, 11-7, 4th place in regular season, run through the playoffs in what was a relatively weak LCS where they 3-0 100 Thieves in the finals, but mediocre regular season. They go to MSI, they go 4-6, they lose a tiebreaker, they're eliminated. Summer split, they're 12-6, like actually not that dominant. This is like, how do you make peace in your head with a support who benches himself during MSI and be like, oh yeah, by the way, he's just back for summer split. Yeah. So like Team Liquid was dealing with that all 2019 summer. They 3-0 C9 in the finals with like the golden glue Jensen swap that C9 was doing with that 7-man roster. They just like squash that. Go on to Worlds, go 3-3, don't make it out of groups. Damn. Bring in Jensen. That was a huge upgrade. They bring in Core JJ as well. Core JJ wins MVP. They go 14-4, but this is like kind of a lie of a 14-4 because they were way better until they started coasting towards the end of the spring split regular season. They actually nearly lose to TSM in the final, which is where you can say, hey, they were pretty close to not winning that split. Then I think they reached their true peak as a team during MSI where, and this is actually pretty funny, they go 4-6, which is the exact same MSI group stage record they had in 2018. But because Flash Wolves is worse, they don't have to play a tiebreaker and they just get in as 4th. So then they beat IG 3-1. That's the crowning achievement. That is the peak Team Liquid. But then it's all downhill from there. They get demolished by G2, as I'm sure everyone remembers. They go 14-4 again in summer, but the playoffs are sketchy. They 3-2 against Clutch. They 3-2 against C9. Multiple moments where it was pretty close that they get eliminated. And then they fail in Worlds once again, 3-3. So what am I getting at? I'm saying that you can individually point out some close calls throughout the splits. Like the 11-7 spring, there were some really touch and go moments when they'd spent all that money on the roster and were mediocre. The spring and summer of 2019, those 5-game series, those are close calls. Those are places where they're challenged. So I guess kind of the point I'm making here is the accomplishment of winning 4 in a row makes them the best NA team ever for that period. But if I had to say the best team at an individual point in NA, like C9 2013 with a 25-3 split was more dominant. 2016 TSM going 17-1 and going to Worlds was more dominant in those windows. So it's going to be interesting to me how this eventually plays out. I think I was clear there, because what happens next will be so fascinating. If Team Liquid bounces back, which at this point does feel a little unthinkable, but if they bounce back in one summer and then they made it out of groups, like it is actually a blip, which is nuts. Like they just had what, as we just described, was the biggest failure by an NA team in NA ever, but it could be washed away in like 6 months, assuming things happen, like assuming we get a world championship. Because then you could say they've won 5 of 6 and they've had their best international showing ever. Like if all those crazy things happened. What my general feeling is, though, is that this team is in trouble right now. I think they did take winning for granted. I think at their core, with the Broxah Xmithie swap, they decided they were going to change styles. And that is bigger than changing a player, because you don't know if they're actually going to be able to do it. Is the peak mid-jungle Team Liquid ever going to be better than the peak bot-focused Team Liquid? I don't know, and I don't really think so. So unless they decide between spring and summer to go back to the way they used to win and not try and win mid-jungle and try and make Broxah what Xmithie was, I don't know what this team does. So will they change coaches? Will they change styles? And how do they come back from this massive disappointment? The thing that's clear is they have some time off, because playoffs are 4 weeks long, and then there's still a break before summer splits start. So they got a long time to actually go in the lab and work on some of this stuff, if that is what they've decided to do. If they say, we're going to run it back with these 5 people, we don't know yet. For me, it's 5:50 p.m. on a Sunday after LCS, where we just saw the actual end of the Team Liquid dynasty. Congratulations to C9. I think they've had such a spectacular year. I'm going to continue to talk about the rest of the LCS. That's going to be on a later podcast this week. I'm going to talk about all the big thoughts from week 9, all the big previews towards playoffs when all those seeds eventually get locked in. But I really just wanted to take a moment to talk about Team Liquid, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or a bunch of other podcast platforms. I'd really appreciate it, so you can get this whenever it comes out. Apologies for only having 1 episode last week, well below my average, which I think has fallen. When we made the teaser trailer, of me talking to TSM Jad on the couch, I think I was a 2.83 podcast per week. I'm definitely closer to 2 at this point. And last week was only 1. So I'm going to do some work to try and pick that up. But for this week, we got this episode that you've just listened to. Thank you very much. And we're going to have another one, tech issues pending. I'm going to do better this time to make sure that one gets out to you on Wednesday. And I'll see you then. Thanks for listening.